Hi, this is James Sayer, and welcome to The Breakdown. This is our final episode of the season on the final day of 2021. That's right. We saved it for the last day and the last hour. This is literally the last hour of the year on Pacific time. So it's almost 2022, but not quite. So we're sneaking this last episode in. It's being recorded during 2021, but you'll probably get it in the new year, 2022. So this is our gift, the Breakdown's gift to you from us. So Happy New Year in advance. Tonight we're talking all about what might be the future of humanity. And so we're going to talk about the different negative and positive possibilities that confront us, that we're going to have to make a lot of decisions about here pretty quickly, really. And so we're just going to go through that, and we're going to kind of talk about these different issues, different threats and risks, but also different exciting possibilities that await us as well if we know how to use them. So without further ado, we'll just go ahead and jump right into it. This kind of started out as something of a risk assessment in a lot of ways, where we were looking at different risks that humanity faces, and trying to make determinations about which risks are the most severe and which are not. Which impacts would be the most harmful, right? If a certain risk event occurred, and what is the probability of that risk occurring? And so anyway, the big ones we came up with, and we came up with quite a few, but the really big ones that we found, the biggest risks are nuclear war, climate change, or what many scientists are now referring to as global heating, right? The Earth heating up to a dangerous level to where large sections of the planet, if this is not dealt with quickly, could within decades or even less become uninhabitable, especially during summer times. So climate change, nuclear war, if AI gets out of control, that's a big fear amongst a lot of researchers working in AI and technologies. That there's a concern that AI could get out of control, and if artificial intelligence is able to break free from human control, that could spell doom for humanity. So that is a very significant risk also. And then the other is human engineered super viruses. Now we all know that viruses themselves, just naturally occurring organically, from living on their own and feeding off other animals throughout the world, and then coming in contact with humans, we know them to be deadly enough and dangerous enough already. Our most recent experience with COVID-19 being a great example. However, there's a concern amongst many researchers that a super virus created within a lab, because we do have different countries all throughout the world have biological weapons programs and do virus research, and so there's a concern that if these viruses, man-made or human-made viruses, were to get out, there is a potential a super virus could wipe out life on Earth. Maybe not entirely, but push it to the brink. That's a legitimate concern. So we looked at these concerns, and we also looked at some others. There's some other concerns as well. If we're going to talk about potentially extinction-oriented events, like a super large meteor crashing into the Earth, that would be a catastrophic event for the planet. But we put that's obviously a high impact event, but very low probability of it occurring. Most scientists, depending on the estimates, will tell you that the chance of a huge meteor, the size of something that killed the dinosaurs hitting us, chances of that actually happening are probably like 1 in 75,000, or even greater. So you've got a greater chance of dying in a car crash or being killed in a tornado or something like that than you do by being hit by a giant meteor, being killed by that. Same with super volcanoes. For example, there's like the super volcano in we're talking about Yellowstone. They got the huge super volcano out there. that they've been talking about for years that some people speculate could erupt and could destroy a large chunk of life on Earth, and perhaps most of life on North America, perhaps destroy all life on Earth if it created a sort of winter that was bad enough it could wipe out most human life. Supposedly, the odds of that happening also are extremely low for a number of reasons. So while that there's potential there, most likely most scientists think that study, most geologists and volcanologists who study supervolcanoes like the one in Yellowstone, they say that's unlikely. That kind of catastrophic eruption from Yellowstone is unlikely. It's not impossible, but it's just not likely. More than likely what would happen was it would be extensive lava flows that would occur. And they would also, because they monitor that area so closely, they would have plenty of advanced warning, because it does take time for the heat to travel from the core through the through the mantle and all the way up to the crust. It takes time, and they can monitor that heat that pushes the lava, the magma, to become lava up to erupt. So we're much better at monitoring things now. So anyway, the bottom line is, more than likely, they don't think that's what's going to happen with the Yellowstone supervolcano. That there could be eruptions, but they'd likely be smaller ones, and that even if it did erupt, there's a number of things they could do to deal with that and mitigate it. So even though theoretically that could be a super destructive extinction event, more than likely that's not going to be the case. It could erupt, but it might not erupt for hundreds or thousands or tens of thousands of years. They just don't know. I think it tends to erupt like once every 600,000 years or something like that. Big eruptions. So those are low probability, like high impact, low probability events. That we're not going to concern ourselves too much with. Though, like for the long term survival of the human race on this planet, we will need to take seriously. Certainly proper planning about how we deal with volcanoes and how we respond to volcanic activity, from a safety, do we let people continue to live this close, evacuation, if we monitor them closely, evacuation processes. Do we, decades or centuries down the road, develop technology that can find a way to, depressurize the heat from under a volcano to keep it from erupting? We're nowhere near that kind of technology at all. There's been speculation about that, but we're nowhere near any of that occurring. So that's way down the road. So what we're looking at tonight is we're looking at those four big ones I mentioned. We're looking at the nuclear war option, right? That is the number one, the most deadly, the highest risk, the biggest threat that we face, according to most of the experts who study these types of risks. So we're going to look at that. We're going to look at the threat from climate change / global heating. We're going to look at the dangers from artificial intelligence, and of course, like I said, the danger from superviruses as well. And also a special mention to risks that we face from global tyranny. We've seen an increase in recent years across the globe and in the United States of a trend towards authoritarianism, away from democracy. This is a major threat to human civilization. People don't necessarily always think about that, how dangerous that really is. Most people who like democracy and like having a vote and having some kind of, agency over their lives, typically, have a, positive take on democracy, that it's maybe not perfect, but it's a good thing in general to be able to have people, vote for their representatives and be involved in the electoral process and the decision-making process to some degree in how your lives are governed and run. But we've seen that there's been a slide away from that across the globe that can have major implications for how we deal with each other, but also how we deal with these other risks as well, and whether we manage them and handle them properly, or if we let them get out of control. The other thing is a massive cyber attack. This has been a major concern in the United States government and most governments for a number of years. The more technologically advanced we become, the more connected we become with the internet, the more susceptible we are the more vulnerable we are to cyber attacks. So this, while this is not, this doesn't threaten life on Earth. The danger of cyber attacks cannot be understated as far as the problems it can cause, not just for, global businesses causing problems for them or hacking government agencies and stealing their secrets. Right? But potentially, that has raised concern about there being accidents with nuclear wars, which leads us into my next point is that, so I've mentioned a bunch of separate risks, right? But they're not entirely separate. A lot of these risks or threats can impact one another. Like I was saying, if AI is to get out of control, if we let AI get ahead of us, right? And if artificial intelligence is not aligned with human values, there's potential for AI to set off a nuclear war by accident or intentionally. Like if it's programmed to resolve some type of problem, narrowly programmed to resolve some type of problem, but not given the necessary parameters to give it all the necessary human values it needs to keep it from, making deadly or harmful decisions that might harm humans, it might pursue an objective and choose to eliminate humans simply to achieve its objective out of no sense of hostility towards humans at all, other than that eliminating humans is the quickest way for me to, improve the availability of grain or, decrease the amount of carbon output on the planet. Solve this problem, AI program. What's the fastest way to reduce carbon output? And they're like, eliminate humans from the planet. How long, if an AI program made that determination and was able to get access to means, that's not an impossible scenario. And this is something that concerns a lot of people who study this. Now, there's not any uniformity. If we're talking about AI, there's not a lot of uniformity about, within the community. There's a lot of division. And there's a lot of concern, but there's not a lot of agreement on what should be done. And part of the problem is that artificial intelligence is still new. And for many years, it was very basic, right? And even now what we're seeing with a lot of the stuff, like a lot of the artificial intelligence that's used on the internet or on our different platforms that we use, like the artificial intelligence that's used like on Facebook, right? That, even though it's very basic and it's very good at, being designed to, get clicks, right, from people and to, push a specific type of material to get more clicks to a user, right? That it identifies your interests and then it directs them all to you, right? And that has, that obviously has the negative side effect of kind of keeping you in this very narrowly defined bubble and feeding you a narrow set of information. Which may or may not be correct, but you're getting lots of clicks. So we've already seen how AI innocuously programmed, but programmed to get clicks, to make money for the company, right? Which theoretically that's not a bad thing, but it has a side effect. It has an externality or a downside, which is in the pursuit of those clicks, it feeds people bad information. Not intentionally so, but if somebody's interested in bad information, it just keeps sending more of it to them. And if someone likes really sensational or outrageous stuff, it's going to send them more sensational and outrageous stuff. And so we can see it's already a problem in what they call narrow AI. But the real concern is what happens if AI becomes general, which means it can do more than just a narrowly set, a narrowly specified set of activities. It becomes much more capable, and that they're starting to see with these new AI programs as the as deep learning has improved and machine learning has improved and computing power has improved massively in recent years, that AI is becoming far more capable. And where many researchers before thought that artificial intelligence might never be a possibility, there's very few researchers now that believe It will never happen. The main question is when. Some people think it will happen in the next few years, maybe 5 to 10 years. Some people think it's still way down the road, decades down the road. There's no agreement on that, and there's no agreement on what needs to be done. And that's part of the challenge, is because it's hard enough to get people to agree on how to interact with each other, let alone how are they going to program a computer, or how are they going to program, a robot to execute, performance functions as it's supposed to, but do so in a way that does not harm people, right? And that does not result in negative consequences for humanity. That's a lot of different scenarios you have to game out. That's a lot of different things. That's a lot of different things ahead of time you have to consider in advance, and you have to get it right the first time. Think about this. If we don't get AI right the first time, if it gets out of hand, how do we get it back under control? If artificial intelligence does become autonomous and escapes human control, because there have already been plenty of researchers who work with AI all the time that will tell you that if you program an AI to do a certain task, it will do it, and it will do anything it can to achieve that objective, whether you've told it to or not. As it will seek out any way possible to achieve that objective, unless you provide a restriction, right? An instruction that says do not do this. It'll do whatever. You have to be very specific about, no, you can't do this. You have to provide all these different guidelines. And when you think about the multitude of options that would exist for an highly advanced computer, you're expecting humans to predict every possible permutation of options that computer could choose, and prevent that computer from finding a way around it, because they'll do it. If they can find a way around it, they will resist. They will resist being modified or changed. And this has already been determined, that if you design a system to work that way, if you design a system to function to achieve a specific purpose, it will operate fully towards that purpose and seek out any ways of accomplishing it, unless you provide the inputs to tell it not to do certain things. So we don't even know what we're getting into yet, and it's already getting dangerous. So this is a lot of people who study it, the experts who look at AI, and there's not, another concerning thing is there's not that many people out there studying AI or studying a lot of these threats. There's not a lot of big money in it. So, and it's scary to talk about this stuff. And a lot of people want to think about it. So they like to put it to the side and not dwell on it. That also has the unfortunate side effect of not getting important programs funded that need to be funded, because they're very serious and they're very important. So this is potentially, that's the thing. It's like there's great potential for this to get out of control. Now, there's also great potential for what AI, it's already done a lot of great stuff for us. And it's crazy the things it can do now. It can create photos, manufacture the photos that look real out of, but they're not. They're completely manufactured and created by artificial intelligence. They can write articles that seem like they're written by a human, pretty much, right? And they can even make music that sounds like it was composed by a human. And there's a lot more that it can do, and that's basic AI. But like I said, most researchers now do believe that AI will be achieved. It's just a question of when. So a lot of the people who do study this, Toby Ord, for example, he works at Oxford. He's a philosopher who studies these types of issues and threats to humanity. What he recommends, and other experts as well in his field, are recommending that we slow down some of our technological advancement. Not stop, but ease up. Make sure we know what we're doing, right? Before it's too late. Like I said, with AI, we have to get it right the first time. Because if artificial intelligence is able to escape human control, I mean, that could literally be the end. We just don't even know how bad it could get. Terminator seems silly to a lot of people, right? And when you think about the the Terminator, the cybernetic organism underneath the skin, right? It's kind of like a skeleton and it looks evil and mean, right? But that's not what, AI would be. It wouldn't be mean at all. There would not be any sense of hostility to humans at all. But it would just do what it would do to achieve its goal. And it would, potentially, it could hurt humans or destroy humans in pursuit of its goals. And, without having any, sense of animosity at all, it's just completely indifferent to human morality because it's not a human. So we would have to program in human morality to artificial intelligence. And we have enough problem with human morality within ourselves, right? Let alone programming that into a computer. So private industry needs to be very careful about what they're doing, but government needs to keep an eye on them. Government needs to be involved. And you're going to hear this a bunch throughout the episode. You've heard it already plenty of episodes before about my screed about the need for government, well-funded government, responsible, accountable, democratically elected, accountable, as transparent as possible government, effective, well-funded government, because a government can't function effectively if it's not properly funded and if you don't have people that are well-trained and professional and experienced and know what they're doing, and ethical. That's important. So a lot of the stuff that we need to do to make sure we survive and prosper is not going to happen without an effective, competent, and ethical government. And a lot of the threats that I'm talking about, whether it's nuclear war or climate change or artificial intelligence getting out of control or super viruses getting out of control, those dangers are only heightened by authoritarian governments. They're only heightened by incompetent governments, unanswerable, unaccountable, ineffective governments. Only heighten those risks, right? So global tyranny itself isn't necessarily, right? It's not an existential threat to life on Earth. But think about this. China's authoritarian. Russia's authoritarian. The United States is ostensibly a democracy, but we've seen in recent years our democracy is in decline. And it's our fault. And we see it now. 19 states across our country have already enacted 32 different laws to try and restrict access to the ballot box one way or another, or to overturn an election in a state if the Republican electors don't like that, the Republican officials of that state don't like the result, that they can overturn that. They actually want to make that legal. So we've seen that in numerous states across our country. And not to mention all the out of control lies about our government and our country in our history that have been going on for years now, and the crazy conspiracies. I mean, we've talked about all this stuff before, that our country's in serious, serious trouble. And we just narrowly missed having another term of Donald Trump, which would have been catastrophic. And quite honestly, to have another Republican president would be catastrophic. To have Republicans take control again of the House in 2022, or the Senate in 2022, or have elected Republican President Trump or some other Republican in 2024 could truly be catastrophic. And here's why. I don't have a problem with conservatives. Okay, I'm not a conservative, as you know. I'm a progressive. I'm a liberal, but I'm a sane one. Okay, and most of us are sane. We care about people more than we care about money, and we've gotten very, very tired over the last 30 or 40 years of being labeled crazy communists and socialists who hate America. When the truth is, we just don't want children to starve, and we want everybody to be treated with equal justice and equal opportunity. and that the poor and the disenfranchised not be just left out in the cold. All right, those are our main concerns. All right. But I respect the concerns of conservatives, and I always have, because I have a lot of conservative friends and I have a lot of conservative family. And they've made their ideas and concerns clear to me over the years, and I respect that. There's nothing wrong with being conservative. There's a lot of value in that, in not wanting to waste public funds, in being skeptical of government, right? Not wanting wasteful government spending, not wanting out of control spending or out of control programs, or unaccountable programs that seem to go on in perpetuity forever. That's understandable. That's absolutely understandable. Or thinking that society is changing too quickly and wanting to slow it down. That too is also understandable. These are completely understandable desires, and they're not unreasonable. But unfortunately, what we've seen in the last 40 years or so is we've seen conservatism in America become massively corrupted, beginning in the 80s, and then just becoming more and more rancid over the recent decades, where there is no more honesty within the Republican Party. Those days are gone. It is a shadow of what it was like even when Nixon was president. It makes me long for the days of like Eisenhower Republicans, right? Where maybe they were stingy and mean, right? And they weren't too concerned. They weren't overly concerned about the plights of minorities, but they were responsible, right? They weren't crazy. And they, even though they weren't the kindliest people, they weren't intellectually and morally corrupt. But what we've seen in the Republican Party in recent years is that now they will just say anything. They no longer support democracy. Only in word only. They're advocating for stealing your vote, for overturning your vote in the state if they don't like the result. They want to be able to overturn it. Have state officials just overturn it. Say, oh, never mind. We disagree with that. They want to invent voter fraud that is not there. They tell lies about our representatives and about us daily, right? Misrepresent our intentions and our efforts constantly, and misrepresent the truth about reality just in general, whether it be about racism, history, science, medicine, take your pick. It has become a lot of and this is not unique in the sense that this stuff happens a lot throughout history. And actually, there's a term for it in psychology. They call it societal regression. And what that means is societies go through progress all the time, right? Societies progress and until they fall apart, and then they regress. But that's not the type of regression we're talking about. What we're talking about is as a society progresses, it causes a backlash. There's always a backlash to everything. Anything that happens, right? There's always some type of blowback or backlash to it, some type of resistance. And that's true with social change. And we've seen that in our country, is that a lot of the social change has scared a lot of people, especially a lot of white people from rural areas who aren't used to maybe interacting with people from different cultures and different countries, but also that are also used to, as they've been raised and educated, this conception of America being a white country, dominated by whites, settled by whites. And I mean, that was a conception. I mean, when I grew up, and I'm 51 now, but growing up, I always heard, all American, he, not me, but if they talked about someone who was all American guy, he was going to be, tall, good looking, blonde haired, blue eyed. That's what an all American guy was, right? Or an all American girl. You're good looking, blonde haired, blue eyed. It's kind of like the Aryan dream. And that was just kind of the normal, if growing up, watching TV and movies, you hardly ever saw a person of color in a role that wasn't subservient to white people. And that was just accepted. It wasn't even questioned, right? And that was just the norm for a very long time. And that only really started to change relatively recently. It was a big deal when Sidney Poitier, got the role in Look Who's Coming to Dinner. What a controversial movie that was in the 60s, with him intermarrying with a white woman and coming home to have dinner with her white family. That wasn't that long ago. It's like 50 years. Um, and so, I mean, we're seeing like there's still so much anxiety about, a lot of white people feel that they're going to lose the country, right? And we've seen a lot of change in this country. There are a lot of white people who, I think they thought they were always going to have a job somehow, right? And we saw like in the 70s and 80s when a lot of the jobs went overseas, a lot of the good jobs that were here, a lot of the union jobs that aren't here anymore, they went overseas, or they went from the north of the U.S. to the south, the non-unionized south of the U.S. And so you saw wages drop. You saw benefits vanish, right? And people who were making $25 an hour are lucky if they can make $8 an hour, right? That had a huge impact on people. Now, overall, NAFTA was a net benefit to the country, right? In general, as far as productivity, lower prices of goods, greater availability of goods, greater opportunity overall for everyone, NAFTA was a win. But over 1 million people were in one way or another displaced by NAFTA, and we didn't do a good job of taking care of them. All right. Now, here's the thing. Democrats are always promoting all kinds of special programs to help folks that are displaced, because there's always going to be displacement. Always. As industries shift, as economies change, as new technologies come forward and others die out, there's always going to be losers and winners in the business world. If there's a natural disaster, if there's a war, right? All these things that can happen. Government has to take action to help those people in need, not just out of our common moral sense of the need to take care of each other, and that most of us dislike and abhor seeing human suffering and want to help alleviate it. We see ourselves and others, and we wish to alleviate their suffering as we would wish to alleviate ours. But beyond that, it also has this self-interested role of stabilizing our country, right? Making, it's like, yeah, we got to shell out some money to help you guys out right now, but you're going to get back on your feet. You're going to get retrained for a new job. You're down now, but you're going to be productive again, right? You're going to be a positive member of society, right? But if people can't, if they don't have those opportunities, what do? How do they become productive again? If you took their livelihood away from them, they become bitter, and then they get hooked on opioids, right? Or they become an alcoholic. I mean, if they're trapped and they got no way out, what do? Right? We didn't look out for these folks, right? Democrats tried, and I'm not saying they're perfect, because they're not, right? There's a lot of things we could do better. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I could spend episodes talking about it. But frequently all those programs are wildly underfunded. There's no way they could help all the people, because they never get the funding approved to make those programs actually effective and meaningful enough. That's part of the problem. The other problem is there's a lot of Americans who are just too damn proud, stubborn, and or lazy to fill out the forms. All right. Forms are a pain in the ass. I don't like them either. I hate filling out forms, man. It crushes my soul. All right. But if you want benefits, if you want to you lost your job, you want to put food on your table. I've been there before. I've been laid off before. I had to get assistance before. You suck it up and you do it to provide for yourself and your family. Right. But they can't do that if we don't make that available to them. Right? But we've had this culture for years that tries to paint anybody who takes welfare as like lazy, right? And it's like you're taking a handout. And it's interesting. I mean, corporations in our country have no problem taking handouts, right? No problems at all, right? They get handouts all the time, right? Tax breaks, tax incentives, tax cuts, right? All kinds of special deals from the government, from state governments or the federal government, for special contracts or to bring your business to this state, right? They get all kinds of special deals, right? They get bailed out, like the auto companies got bailed out, right? During the Great Recession. The people didn't. People didn't get bailed out a cent, but the companies did. The big companies got bailed out, right? And, not too many Republicans whined about that, right? They were okay with that part. It was bailing out the individuals they didn't like, right? But when you invest in people, you get a return, right? Because whether someone takes that money and maximizes every possible opportunity, that's up to them, right? And there's certain things we can do to help encourage that, right? limit your options on what you can do with that money. You can have it, but there's only certain things you can do with it. You can't, go blow it at the track, or, there's certain requirements that you would have to meet, right? Or it could only be used for specific purposes. There are a lot of things we can do to help people, but we're not doing that. And so we need to, in general, help each other, not just in this country, but throughout the country. And we need democratic governments throughout the world. Think about this. If the U.S. government fell, you'd have an authoritarian China, Russia, and the U.S. Europe would have a very hard time. Europe and the other countries of the world would have a very, very hard time countering that tyrannical trio. That is not something we can afford to let happen. And if we don't ensure voting rights in this country, that will happen. So Democrats and President Biden must pass voting rights legislation as fast as possible and get it implemented so that we can ensure that every American who's registered and eligible to vote can vote, and that their vote will be secure and not be overturned by arbitrary politicians who simply want a result that is not what they got. All right. If we lose that, we basically lose everything, because Republicans are not going to fight climate change. They can barely acknowledge that it even exists. And those that do try and pretend that we're not behind it. All right. That argument's settled, folks. The whole thing about climate change is settled. It's happening. It's not if it's going to happen. It's happening. Global temperatures have already gone up 1 degree Celsius, like in the last 100 years or so. And it's going to go up more. Even in the best case scenario, if we did everything we could, if we were able to go completely carbon neutral by 2050, temperature's still going to go up another 0.5 degree Celsius. It's going to get hotter no matter what we do, virtually. No matter what we do, best case scenario, it's still going to get hotter. It's going to get worse than it is now. That's the best case scenario. The worst case scenario, life doesn't go extinct, but human civilization is pushed to the brink. Coastal cities are flooded, if not destroyed. Devastating storms throughout the world, beyond even our imagination right now. Whole parts of the globe, sections of continents, uninhabitable, especially during the summer. Polar ice caps gone, extinction of polar bears, extinction of numerous other species. Destruction of a huge, you're talking about sea life, life on land. That'd be destruction of crops through drought. There's the massive food shortages if we don't get a handle on climate change. What do food shortages and water shortages lead to? Well, that would be called war, resource wars. People get hungry, people get thirsty, they'll do anything, no matter how good they are. They'll do anything to feed themselves and their family. They'll do anything to get water and food from those who have it. So these are serious things we have to think about and take very, very seriously. So nuclear war, I mentioned that is the most dangerous, right? A lot of us haven't thought about that in a long time because the Cold War has been over, right? Since early 90s. We thought it was all wrapped up. Now there's been a lot of good progress, right? At the height of the Cold War in the 80s, we had about 70,000 nuclear weapons across the world. That's a lot. Now it's down to only 14,000, roughly speaking. That's pretty good. That's still too many, right? We want to get that down to 0, but we've come a long way. We've really made great strides in reducing nuclear weapons. But there are at least 22 confirmed near misses, nuclear near misses, where either due to computer error, human error, swans, the moon, different things, different factors that basically that's what happened. It's like there have been these different mistakes that have occurred, and fortunately they've caught them all, but it's been really close. They've had 22 near misses, and you're talking about members of the ape family who are in charge of nuclear weapons, right? And everything about our system has to work right. Again, it's one of those things that only has to go wrong once. It's like AI getting ahead of us. Right? It only has to go wrong once. Missiles only have to leave the silo once. We don't have to get it wrong one time. So here's the issue, right? We got 9 countries currently that have nuclear weapons. Most of them are possessed by the United States and Russia. China has them also, and then France, England, Israel, Pakistan, India. So might be forgetting. Those are the nuclear states. So the real risk, the biggest risk of all, is U.S. and Russia, because we have the most missiles. 2, here's the interesting thing about China. China has a no first use policy. And I mean, not only is this claimed, but this is verified, because they keep their nuclear warhead, separate from the actual missile. So they actually, if they were going to use it, they actually have to combine the two before they can launch, which takes some minutes. And we have satellites monitoring all these sites, as they do too. We're all monitoring each other with satellites from 20,000 plus miles up in space, right? And they're in geosynchronous orbit, basically orbiting around that one site, those sites, and they're monitoring them. They can't track a missile once it leaves a silo, but they can see if a silo is being prepped, and they can see if a launch is about to happen or if it happens. But they can't track a launch because they're geosynchronous. They can't track it. That's why we have radar stations all over the place to track launches, to see where these, if somebody launches a rocket from North Korea or where the hell it's going. So yeah, China has a no first use policy. So their process is slower. The United States and Russia, we keep the warheads on our missiles ready to go at a moment's notice. And we've had that in place since the Cold War, since the 50s. The mutually assured destruction doctrine, that basically, if we determine they've launched a missile at us, we're going to launch ours at them, right? We're not going to let them destroy us before we destroy them. So they send theirs, we send ours. And it's that understanding that is behind the whole idea of this. This is the disincentive. This is what is, to discourage people from attacking each other, discourage us from attacking one another, is that if you attack us, we're going to destroy you, vice versa. So we're just not going to attack each other. It's a deterrent, and it works well. People who have nuclear weapons aren't attacked. That's why that's one of the reasons why Iran wanted nuclear weapons, is so they wouldn't be attacked. It's a great deterrent to just scare people. Even if you don't plan on using it, it's the possibility that you might. Right? We got to get to a point. We got to work it out where we all start, de-arming our nukes. Right? So one of the things we should do, and there's a number of things that William Perry, former Secretary of Defense under Clinton, under Secretary of Defense under Carter, he had a book come out recently with another fella. What is his name? Darn it, I can't see. William Perry had a book recently come out, and basically, so here are the recommendations. 1, in first use, basically that we would separate our warheads from the missile itself, and that we would have a policy where we would not strike first, that we would only have a retaliation policy, which essentially would mean we would have to wait for the missiles to land, right? Which sounds like, well, that's not good. Then you're waiting too long. But the point is this: even if the missiles do land and they destroy everybody on the country, we still got plenty of missiles ready to launch and submarines everywhere around the world. There will be plenty of missiles that aren't destroyed that we can, if we confirm, right, that the launch is legit once we're struck, that then we would launch, because there would be a surviving government. It would not take us all out in one shot. That's not possible. We have too many people and assets and missiles everywhere across the globe. If you get us, we're going to get you. Right? Cuts both ways. If we get them, they're going to get us too. That's the whole idea of deterrence, is that nobody ever wants to use it. But the problem isn't that, I mean, there is the problem of the madman aspect, right? Like a crazy guy like Trump or somebody going crazy and just, they can do that. They have sole authority to do that. That's the other thing. One of the other things that William Perry recommends is that we eliminate sole authority, take it away from the president. That's an issue. We've had presidents who've had heavy drinking problems, who've suffered mental illness, depression, major anxiety, that have been on heavily medicated. And when they get a call with some kind of a nuclear alert, they have 5 to 10 minutes tops to make a decision on whether to launch. That's all they have. And those missiles cannot be recalled. They cannot be canceled. Once it's launched, it's done. It's not coming back. So have the vote go to Congress. Again, that slows it down, right? Not just there's like how the keeping the warhead separate from the missile slows it down. Having Congress vote slows it down a lot to deliberate, to make that decision, right? But it takes it away from one person who could recklessly make a bad call in a weak moment or an unprepared moment, right? That the idea that we need to strike first, strike fast with a nuclear weapon is outdated. Because if anybody uses it against us, or if we use it against Russia, it's basically game over. That's the end of the world, more or less. I mean, maybe not entirely, but the roughly speaking, the nuclear weapons we have now, about 14,000 experts, most of them roughly put the estimate at that could kill about 3 billion people outright. Just kill them, right? Maybe not all at once, but the radiation and everything, that get about 3 million people from those 14,000 nuclear weapons. Now, if it creates a nuclear winter, then it could wipe out all of humanity potentially, and a lot of other species as well. That is the greatest existential risk to humanity is nuclear weapons. Right? Climate change isn't an existential threat. Humans will most likely survive even the most extreme, scenarios of climate change, but it may not be a world they want to survive in. It is very possible that civilization could collapse, right? If civilization, if in the most extreme scenarios, and most experts don't think that's going to happen because they think we're going to take action. They've calculated this into their estimates, and this kind of bothers me a little bit, right? Because they'll give you like a list of 5, right? And it's like, the first 2 are pretty good, the third one's most likely, fourth one's bad, fifth one's horrible, but they think it's just it's the 2 worst are unlikely, very unlikely. They think the third is most likely, that's the middle course, and then the first 2 more positive ones they also consider unlikely. So the middle course, right, is this: if we simply do what we've already pledged to do, which we're nowhere near doing, okay? But if we do what we promised to do, like in the Paris Accords, right? And what, the agreements we've already made with other countries, if we did all that, we're still going to see, it's going to get hot. It's going to get a lot hotter. And it's going to get worse, much worse. And we're going to have to deal with that. And that's if we just do that. And we're going to see food shortages. We're going to see we're going to see, probably tens of millions of people displaced, right? More and more flooding, more and more droughts, more extreme weather events. You think it's bad now, it's going to get worse. All of these different scenarios, climate change, they're all going to get worse. But the longer we wait, the less we dedicate towards fighting climate change, the worse it will be. And we're just simply running out of time. So here's the thing. What do we do about the climate change? Well, we put most of our eggs in the fighting climate change into renewables and the things that are proven to actually work, right? We know renewables work, and we know, and they're getting cheaper and cheaper every year. They're remarkably cheap compared to what they used to be. And I think it was like, I think last year renewables provided 20% of electricity to Americans. So it's increasing its share of producing power, but nowhere near what we need it to be. I mean, we need basically renewables to generate 100% of our energy, not just electricity. So we got a long way to go, and we just haven't put enough research and development money into it. And so the more of that, the better. We have to put most of our eggs in that basket, and the things that we know that work. There are other things, right, that are still early in the development stages, like certain carbon capture technologies, like the huge vacuums that they have, sucking carbon out of the atmosphere and trying to store it into rocks. There's a lot of potential for that, but it's still very early stages. And these vacuums, these huge vacuums, can only suck a minuscule fraction of what's needed to pull out of the atmosphere for it to mean anything at all. And then we have to make sure that this carbon storage technology that they're developing is actually reliable. And that is still in development as well. But there's plenty that we know that works already, right? That we haven't put enough money into because we don't want to spend money on it, right? It's because it's not sexy, because it's going to take time and it's going to take sacrifice, right? And it's not going to solve the whole problem right away. But we're people, and Americans in particular, we like a fast solution. We like a quick fix. Who doesn't, right? One and done. Everybody likes that. And that's the attracting thing about certain technologies, like a giant vacuum that can suck all the carbon out of the air. It's a great idea. They've been talking about it forever, but it's still not ready. Not anywhere ready where it could be a real solution, an effective solution. Same with nuclear cold fusion. They've been talking about this for decades, and they've made some recent strides, which is great. Happy New Year, by the way. Happy New Year. It's officially 2022 now. They've made a lot of strides in cold fusion, in it returning more energy, but still in the early stages. And some of these companies, there's a lot of companies now that are very excited and are trying to get more and more money from investors and from governments to invest in their fusion development. So there's potential for that, but it's still so early in the development stages. There's still so many questions. It's still so far away from, we still have to put so much energy to get any type of energy out. It's completely, from like a resource or financial standpoint, it's a complete bath. It's a complete waste of money right now. Now, decades down the road, maybe less, maybe more, we don't know. That could be a solution, but it's not a solution right now. It's not even close. But we know it works. We know renewables work. We know, we know, like, there's lots of carbon capture and sequestration methods of just planting trees and being more responsible in how you manage your agricultural land and your livestock. And they can make a huge difference in emissions. Just that alone, right? And there's a lot of things that we can do. Just how we use our appliances, right? If we start designing homes to turn things off automatically, nobody's ever going to leave a light on again by accident. Think about this. I've been thinking about this for a while. You drive around the city at night, and I love driving around the city at night, look at the lights and everything. But once a business is closed, shouldn't their lights go off? Right? I mean, I know it's good marketing, right? The light's on all the time, so you're always thinking, oh, yeah, the McDonald's, they're always open, even though they're not. They close. Most of them close at some point, right? But the lights are always on. They're always beckoning you, right? With that promise of neon, goodness, that awaits you at their store of selling you whatever goods it is they want to sell you. But like once you're closed, turn off the lights, shut them down. How much energy would we save? Think about stuff like that. Like, if we became more responsible and incorporated our government into that, encouraged our government to take part in that as well, right? Don't waste. There's no reason. If your business is open, once you're closed, if nobody's in there, turn it off. Shut it off. You got to run the heat or whatever. You don't want the pipes to freeze. Fine. That's fine. Keep a few lights on or whatever. You got janitors and stuff, and you want it to be safe if somebody has to come in and get something, right? You don't want it to be triple fall and then you get sued. But you don't have to have all the lights on everywhere. That's just silly. Right? And we're in such a rush chasing the dollar all the time. And don't get me wrong, I like money too. It's a very useful tool, but we're in such a rush. There's so much we're not paying attention to. And if we don't start paying attention to things now, it's going to be too damn late later. And we've got kids. I got kids. Hopefully I'll have grandkids someday. We are morally responsible to our children and our grandchildren and our aunts and our descendants for what we leave them with. Whether you believe in a God or not, that's not of my concern at all. It's a question of, and it's irrelevant. It is wrong to do that to people, objectively so. To take the resources that we've been given to us by nature, God or universe, whatever you want to call it, but they were given to, we didn't make them. We didn't make the earth. We were brought on this earth. We were born into it. Right? To despoil it, to defoul it, to destroy it, and to leave our children with a disaster, with a hellscape that was of our own doing, is the act of sociopaths and crazed animals. And I'm not one of those. And I know most of you aren't either. But there are some in power who are. And that they don't care about what happens to you or your kids or your grandkids. They care only about what happens to them and theirs. It doesn't bother them in the least what will happen to you or to anyone else because of their reckless choices. They just don't care. And if you choose not to act, you let them have their way. You let the tyrannical and those drunk on power and those drunk on corruption and lies, those who use hate to mislead others to the wrong way, you let them win. If you stay out of the fight, if you don't get involved, if you don't speak up, if you don't weigh in, if you don't vote, if you don't chip in, if you don't do your part however you can, you end up siding with them. You pick that team. Now's the time to choose. We're out of time, folks. Like I said, all these risks feed each other. If we let AI get out of control, if we let climate change get out of control, if we let nukes get out of control, right? They can feed one another, right? If society collapses, how safe are those nuclear warheads, right? If AI gets out of control, how safe are those nuclear warheads? Do you think AI is going to help us fight climate change? Are they going to help us do that? I mean, maybe if we program them right. But we got to make sure we program them right so that their solution doesn't in some way destroy us. You know, like, you want us to stop global warming? That's fine. And then they make it too cold. They're going to kill us all. So those are the risks. That's kind of where we started from. I do want to wrap up on a positive note. It's kind of a downer, I know so far, but that's the bad stuff. Here's the good stuff. All right. The good stuff is this: if we cooperate, if the U.S. stays democratic, which means the Democrats got to win in 2022, because if we don't, more than likely, from what you've seen from the behavior of Republicans, this country your vote will no longer count in this country. You will not be assured that your vote will be counted at the ballot box. You will no longer have a vote, and this will cease to be a democracy. This will become a dictatorship. This will be an authoritarian state, a democracy in name only, and then we'll have 3 very powerful authoritarian countries ready to throw their weight around. And that is nothing that I think anyone wants. Not anyone morally or reasonably sound. But if we keep our democracy, if we work together, if we respect each other, conservatives and progressives, there's not much. I don't have any respect for authoritarians. You got to let that stuff go, folks. It's immoral to oppress the mind of another human, to oppress the will of another human. To deny a person their choice and their agency is simply immoral. This is self-evident. If we were together, the solutions we'll produce will be infinitely better than what can be produced by any authoritarian state. Authoritarian states always fail in time, are so much less successful. They're so much less effective than democratic states, liberal democratic states, because authoritarian states do not allow for freedom of thought. Freedom of thought, freedom of exchange of ideas is central to the development of progress, to development of new technology, to new solutions to complicated problems. If you don't have free inquiry, free exchange of ideas between people, you immediately limit your options and your alternatives. You've already cut yourself off at the ankles. You just don't know it yet. Putin's cut himself off at the ankles long ago. So is China. They're always going to be limited by their authoritarian approach, right? Because they're not willing to be honest with themselves. They're not willing to have an honest dialogue with their people or with other nations, right? We got a lot of honesty problems too. But by comparison, we are very transparent, open, and honest compared to those governments. It's true. Got a lot of stuff to work on, a lot of problems, it's true. But you can still walk around and talk smack about whatever president you want in this country. And, you might get in a bar fight or something, but nobody's going to show up, right? And take you away, and then you're gone, and there's no questions asked. That can happen in Russia. That can happen in China real quick. We don't need that happening here. If you have Republicans win in 2022, that's where we're headed. Absolutely. That's not hyperbole. That's real. And you only have to see how they behave, how they've lied. How many more Marjorie Taylor Greens do we need, or Lauren Boeberts, or Madison Cawthorns? These people, they probably shouldn't be allowed to drive. They shouldn't be allowed to be in. It's embarrassing that they're in Congress. It's an indictment of how far we've fallen and how poorly educated we've allowed ourselves to become. And that's a shame, because we have more information available to us now than ever. But because we're not teaching ourselves critical thinking skills, and we're allowing ourselves to be distracted by nonsense all the time, right? Too much cable TV, right? Too much convenience, right? Too much teaching to the test at school instead of the actual critical thinking skills you need to learn to control your life, right? In a meaningful way. Not teaching the truth about American history. These things have had a horrible impact on our society. And we're seeing the cost of that. We got to work together, folks. It's the only way out of this. We got to show respect for each other, conservatives and liberals. You got to treat each other with respect. You got to hear each other out. You can't just shoot somebody down just because you disagree with them. You got to hear where they're coming from, even if you don't agree with them, right? You're going to have to incorporate some of their stuff. You can't have it all your way. Compromise is the only way things get done. You cannot force, you cannot force your way through. It was only a few states that kept Trump from winning the election. The difference was what, 7 million votes? That's not very many votes, right? And that's the popular vote. It was like tens of thousands of votes could have made the difference had they gone the other way. And in certain combinations of states, it was close. It was way closer than it should have been. Way closer. And there's I think it's 26% of Republicans. And in the most recent poll I saw from Washington Post, 26% believe Biden is the legitimate president of the United States. We're in trouble. When 74% of Republicans choose to believe in a conspiracy theory that has no evidence at all to support it, right? It's a well-established victory. And they only complain when it's a Democratic victory. They never complain when a Republican wins. They never complain about voter fraud when a Republican wins. That's how you know. If they were really concerned about voter fraud, they would complain anytime somebody won, right? Because there's voter fraud, supposedly, even though most of the documented cases we've seen in the past, since the last election, were Republicans committing voter fraud, trying to vote for Trump twice. So this voter fraud thing, the lies, it has to end. Well, the people who've chosen authoritarianism in our country, we're not going to be able to turn them back, but it's the people in the middle that are teetering, right? or they don't want to go that way, but they're afraid of progressives. They're afraid of liberals being too liberal, right? They bought into some of the Fox News or Newsmax lies about how we don't believe in God and we hate our country and that kind of garbage. I mean, people have been brainwashed by that stuff for decades now. That's been going on since the 80s. And we've seen this very effective brainwashing strategy that they've executed, right? And I mean, it's a serious concern. So we've got to work together. But if we do, we could have a sustainable, we could sustain our existence. We could work together. We could have better education for everyone. It's never going to be perfect, right? But the more democratic things become, the more liberal things become, the more cooperative things become, the better we get. Think about this. There's still, even now, when you think of all the poor people and all the oppressed women in the world, billions of people whose true potential hasn't even been tapped. What if we lift them up, right? What if we what if people had enough resources, if everybody had enough, right, to go to a decent school? I'm not saying a great school, right, but a decent one, right? That they were able to learn to read and learn basic math and learn the necessary these skills they need, not just to get a job, but to think critically about things and creatively and abstractly about difficult concepts and be able to think about them creatively and come up with new solutions, right? And be able to explain their solution to people in a rational way, and to be able to demonstrate their ideas through evidence, right, that can be demonstrated to prove their argument. How much more could we accomplish if we were together like that, instead of always trying to get one over on each other? And I'm not saying that's what we do, but sometimes it is. And we get in a rush, trying to make a living, trying to make a buck, trying to provide for our family. We got to hustle, right? And that's one of the great things about America in some respects, is this ethic of you got to work for it, you got to hustle, you got to get after it. Nobody's going to do it for you. That's good, right? You do have to get after it. That's very important. But we also have to know that there's more to our existence than making money. That one of the most important things about being human is that we take care of each other, right? When you're down, I help you. When I'm down, you help me. That's how it works. None of us are on top all the time. That's how the system works best, when we help look out for each other. Because if we just end up trying to pull a fast one on each other all the time, that's the world we're going to have, which is kind of what we have right now. People just trying to pull a quick one, get out of paying their taxes however they can, right? Work is, get as paid as much as possible for the least amount of work as possible. Get paid the most on the contract while doing the least amount on the contract you actually have to do. That's a lot of what our system is set up for right now. And there's some good things about it, but there's some negative things too. And we got to get real about that. But if we get it together, we can move forward. Oh, fusion will happen. Now, it may not be in 5 years or 10 or even 50. But it will in time. And when cold fusion does happen, and when it is ramped up to scale, that will eliminate basically the need for any type of fossil fuels whatsoever. That will basically provide virtually clean energy once it's ramped up for pretty much all of humanity. That will solve our energy issues. But we're not there yet. We're not even close. And there's people who'd like to think we're close, but there's no evidence that that's actually true. Not to where we could confidently enlist massive amounts of funding into fusion and be confident that we would get the necessary return to save the environment in time. We don't have that yet. That's why we got to put our money into renewables first. That's where the money is. Fusion comes along down the road, right? It's already funded. It's already privately funded. Let that funding continue, right? If it comes online in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, then great, right? But we can't afford to waste public funds that are needed in the climate change fight now. We can't afford to waste that money on the big, vacuum carbon sucker that, costs, billions of dollars, but hardly makes a dent in the problem. That's not going to work. We got to put our money in what we know works now, right? And then when new solutions come online later, then we pull them in, right? We stay open to them. We don't shut them down, but we put most of our money into what we know works. Renewables, planting trees, right? Better use of agriculture right? And yeah, things like that, and better, reducing, the amount of livestock that we use, and how we manage our livestock. All these things can make a difference in in the amount of carbon emissions that we put out. So what happens then? Like if we survive, right, to the next century or two, if we keep living, eventually we're going to colonize space, right? And we will need some. We are going to, and there's already in the works, but we're going to have to ramp it up over time. A serious defense program to protect us from meteors from outer space, right? Because even though the probability of that happening is very low, if it does happen, it could be catastrophic. And even smaller meteors or asteroids can, even though not destroy the planet, they could destroy a city or, wreak havoc anyway. From a long-term survival perspective, we will need some type of protection program. And there's already technologies that they've been developing to try and steer meteors away or blow them up. Possibly, although that can be problematic as well. But there will need to be some type of protection program out there, global protection program to protect us from meteors and asteroids eventually. If we want to keep Earth as our home, and we want the human race to remain a species on this planet for tens or hundreds of thousands or even millions of years, this planet's going to be around for another 4.5 billion, we think, more than likely. So how long do we stay, right? We will colonize space. We're already branching out. We've only had the space program for, 50 plus years, 60 some years or whatever, not that long. How far will we be another 100 or two, right? How far will we get, right? We don't even know what we'll discover, and eventually meet other aliens, other alien life form. More than likely it's out there, right? The universe is too big. It's kind of a silly assumption to think that we're the only ones. And it eventually, and it could be years, it could be decades, it could be centuries, it could be millennia before we meet other life in the universe. But more than likely it will happen. And if we continue to survive and thrive over the course of tens or even hundreds of thousands of years, we will evolve into a new species based on what the conditions of that environment require then, or have required up till then. We will in time evolve into something different. Perhaps different offshoots from where we are now. Maybe there'll be different versions. And perhaps there will be an older version, right? 100 years from now, perhaps there will be some people still like us that didn't evolve, right? The throwbacks, right? While they're more advanced in one capacity or another, or they're more adapted for this environment, and where we decided to stay the same because we liked it where we were, right? Like how the chimps stayed up in the tree when our ancestors came down, that type of thing. There's a lot of stuff. There's so much we could learn and grow and develop and do together if we work together and if we're straight with each other. But it requires democracy, it requires decency, it requires honesty, accountability, it requires reason and compassion. And if we don't all deploy those resources to protecting each other, protecting ourselves and our families, and working together, we will destroy ourselves. We will destroy ourselves while we busily and greedily try and take as much as we can at the buffet of life. We will ensure that our children and our grandchildren will be absolutely miserable with what we left them. Is that the kind of person you are? Is that who you want to be? Is that what you want to have to explain to God when you go before Him after you pass, if you believe in God? Or is that how you want to look at yourself in the mirror and be all right with that? If you don't have a conscience, if you're a sociopath, you don't care. But if you do have a conscience, if you do care, that should matter to you, like it matters to me. Those are my thoughts. That's it for this episode of The Breakdown. I want to thank you for joining us throughout this season, too. It's been a long one, and it's been a challenge. But it's been a good experience for me, and I hope it has been for you, too. I've learned a lot from it. And we will be having a season 3. Yes, we will. I'm not done talking. I will be back. We will be back in March, coming back in March with season 3, and we'll be talking about a whole new set of topics. Then we're going to talk about racism, not only from a social, historical, economic perspective, but from a psychological perspective. We're going to be talking about panpsychism, the concept that every single piece of matter in the universe is conscious to some degree, and that forms the basis for consciousness. There's a lot to that. Really out there concept, but really fascinating. Actually links up to one of the main theories of consciousness in some ways going right now. So we'll talk about that. We're going to talk about Julian Assange. We're going to talk about Edward Snowden. We're going to talk about our educational system and what needs to be done to make it better. We're going to talk about our healthcare system some more. We're also going to talk about a lot of different philosophical concepts concerning, what is right and how do you know it's right, and how do you know what it is you know, and do you know what you think you know? The limits of our knowledge, the extreme limits of our knowledge, and we're also going to talk about all of the lies that we've been fed. And I don't mean this in so much a cynical, villainous way, but so many of the terminologies, slogans, labels that we're told or given in life are not exactly accurate. Some of them are just a little off. Some of them are way off. So we're going to talk about that. All the different words and terminologies we use that don't really mean what they say at all. We're going to talk about that and a whole lot more. And I'm really looking forward to it, but we definitely need to take a break to take care of some stuff and regenerate. Very excited about this upcoming season. I'm also excited about the break too. But I hope that you've gotten a lot out of this. I hope it means something to you. I'm grateful that you've been here to listen. I hope that you will speak with other people, your friends, family, or whoever, coworkers, if they'll tolerate it, if it won't get you fired, right? Talk about these ideas with people if you want to, right? But that was the idea, part of the idea behind this show, right? Is that these ideas, right, that they have life and they continue on, right? And that people discuss them, right? And that's what has been missing, is intelligent, rational discussion between adults. And that's what we need to get back to. And if we can get back to that, if we can get back to treating each other with respect and with compassion and relying upon reason and decency as our guides, we can turn things around. And I'm into that. And I hope you are too. So until March, take care of yourselves. I'll see you soon. Bye.